Hi there, and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Data, providing an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we will go over a new article from the Institute of Family Studies entitled Rethinking the One, How the Soulmate Script Distorts Romance. Through our analysis of this article, we'll cover some key concepts such as the illusion of perspective, soulmate marriage, only one marriage, investment, commitment, destiny beliefs, growth beliefs, and self-expansion. Also, be sure to tune in to the end of the episode for this week's Ask Dr. Shepard, where I open up about how I maintain such close relationships with my best friends. So with that said, the article from the Institute of Family Studies starts out by mentioning how social media can make the ideal feel normal, as if healthy, committed romantic relationships are always smooth, conflict-free, and endlessly exciting. But we must remind ourselves that what we see online is oftentimes just a highlight reel from other people's lives, and it's really what they want us to believe, not necessarily what is their reality, and therefore we rarely get to see the complexities and, quite frankly, the messiness that is committed romantic relationships. So one of the authors, Molly, even admits that she held this unrealistic belief of love and sustained this for quite a while, therefore, in hindsight, leading to some unrealistic beliefs that she believes played major roles in the deterioration of different romantic relationships that she had. So with that in mind, they mention a YouGov survey from 2021. So roughly 5 years old. I'd love to see maybe a more recent study. But from this study of nearly 15,000 Americans, they found that 60% of American adults believed in soulmates, and Americans who are in civil partnerships, 66%, or married at 59%, were of course more likely than those who were single at 49%, or divorced at 52%, to say that they believed in the idea of soulmates. Women from this survey at 64% are more likely than men at 55% to believe in the idea of a perfect romantic match. So why is it that people believe in soulmates? The article argues that soulmate thinking is appealing in part because it promises a shortcut to committed romantic partnership and potentially removes some of the work that is necessary to create, sustain, and maintain a long-term committed romantic partnership. So with the idea of soulmate thinking, essentially, if you're meant for one person, then when you feel that spark, you lean in. But if you don't, you just keep it moving. Additionally, modern dating is stuck between searching for too little and searching for too long. And so I think people being stuck in this binary of feeling as if they've been searching for too long, or on the flip side, that they've been searching too little, would lean into this idea of the soulmate, because then it would maybe explain, for especially the people that have been looking for too long, why they haven't found that person yet. Well, they exist, I just maybe haven't done enough. So maybe I've been, quote unquote, too little. And then for those that have been too long, well, where is my soulmate? Reminds me of the Ray song, Where is My Husband, right? I've been out here for a while. I've been working on myself. I've been doing things. I've been on the apps. I'm on social media. Where is this person? Additionally, an abundance of options can also feed the belief that there's always maybe somebody better out there. I talked about this briefly in my book, Midnight Musings, Interpersonal Communication and Social Media, and I coined it the illusion of perspective, where due to social media and dating apps, one oftentimes feels an aversion to commitment because they are always just one swipe away or one exchange away on a social media platform for finding someone who is quote unquote better. Because these dating sites and apps flood us with hundreds of people from all around the world. So while that sounds great, we're inundated with too many choices, and so you never truly make a choice. I oftentimes think about Netflix. If you ever go on Netflix or really any streaming platform, you don't have an idea of what you want to watch, you will spend so much time clicking through and saying, oh, this looks interesting, but I'm not in the mood for that right now, so let me add it to my list. And oftentimes, I don't know about you, I'm guilty of this. I rarely go back to that list and watch what I've saved for later. And that's the same with kind of the illusion of perspective. You're flooded with so many choices that you rarely, if ever, make a choice. So you're stuck in this cycle of kind of talking to people, maybe going on a few dates. But if you believe in that soulmate aspect, you don't feel the spark. Therefore, you move on to the next person and to the next person and to the next person. So, with that in mind, with the illusion of perspective, the article talks about soulmate marriages versus only one marriages. So, soulmate marriage, it assumes that there's only one perfect fit for you, where only one marriage is built by two imperfect people who are actively choosing each other and are creating oneness through fidelity, sacrifice, and sharing their lives over time. So, soulmate thinking clearly places success outside of personal agency and encourages kind of a backward sequence of relational development where the only one model emphasizes the oneness is made, not found. So, if you believe in the soulmate marriage, you kind of are removing your agency from dating, from finding that person because, well, it's not up to you. It's kind of up to the connection that will happen. Someone is a divine being that was placed on this earth for you. So all you have to do is be open to finding that person. So going on those dates, being in those spaces, and when you find it or feel it, it'll happen. So it's taking away, of course, the work that goes into any interpersonal relationship. As we have been talking about for a year and some change on this podcast, any interpersonal relationship is going to require work. But unfortunately, a lot of social media mindsets are, a great relationship doesn't require work. It just fits. It happens. I see this a lot when people talk about friendships or even dating, where, well, I shouldn't have to work at building friendships, or I shouldn't have to work at dating. If I'm supposed to be with this person, we'll just gel and we'll fit naturally. And to be quite frank, that's a cop-out and not really true in the real world. If you do feel as if a relationship that you've had for a while isn't a lot of work, I would probably argue it's because the other party is doing the lion's share of that maintenance for that relationship to sustain. And as someone who has been on that end of doing the majority of the maintenance, when I have pulled back doing that maintenance for certain relationships, 9 times out of 10, those relationships crumble because the person was accustomed and kind of taking advantage of the work I was doing and wasn't necessarily willing or able to put in that work. As I always tell somebody, who wouldn't love somebody that always makes the plans? Who wouldn't love somebody that always wants to drive or hang out at your place? Who wouldn't like somebody who's always willing to cook for you or to pay your way? Of course you would, but where's the reciprocation? And all relationships need that reciprocation. Also, the problem is not that there's a desire for a special enduring bond. The problem is believing that the bond is discovered fully formed rather than created through ongoing investment and continually showing that commitment. So, of course, investment, as we have talked about throughout this podcast, is a bedrock for any interpersonal relationship. Investment is what you put into the relationship. It's your time, it's your energy, it's maybe even your finances. These are what you need to grow any relationship. You have to be present. And then, of course, commitment is active, right? You don't feel committed. Commitment is not passive, it's active. You're committed because you find it comfortable and pleasing, and hopefully you want to show up and work and be in this partnership with somebody, but it is just not you sitting back idly. You have to show up. You have to do the work. You have to actually get your hands dirty, right? Commitment is vital in any romantic relationship or really any interpersonal relationship because it's a decision to stay in the relationship. So we want to make sure that you are available to nurture and encourage and engage in that relationship. That is part of the commitment. The commitment is just not, okay, we're boyfriend and girlfriend or we're husband and wife. Your commitment is actively showing up each and every day and choosing that person for better or worse. So it's going to be really important if you believe in that soulmate marriage, you're kind of believing that the bond is already fully formed and that you're just discovering it rather than actually creating it through investment, through commitment, through emotional closeness, through trust, through support, through building passion, through building intimacy, through self-disclosure, all of these things that we've talked about that are bedrocks for any interpersonal relationship. And when it comes to further understanding kind of soulmate marriages and only one marriages, the article talks about relationship science distinguishing between destiny beliefs and growth beliefs. So destiny beliefs suggest relationships are either meant to be or not. This is essentially we either fit together or we don't, right? We're puzzle pieces, and are our pieces designed to be interlocked with one another or are they not? We're not supposed to be together. Where growth beliefs assume relationships can improve through effort and adaptation. So you could maybe change how your piece is to fit the other person. And research has shown that these beliefs oftentimes shape how partners approach conflict, maintain their behaviors, and potentially long-term commitment. So individuals who endorse destiny beliefs, right, that we're either meant to be or not, are more likely to interpret challenges as signs that a relationship is flawed and oftentimes will overlook these potential romantic partners as worthy matches because they don't align perfectly and they don't fit the idealized image of quote unquote the one. On the other hand, individuals who have a stronger growth belief tend to view difficulties as normal, manageable, and a part of relational developments. So clearly, growth beliefs also play a central role in facilitating self-expansion, another important concept that the article mentions. And so self-expansion is a process in which partners include each other in their sense of self and grow through shared meaningful and oftentimes novel activities. So I oftentimes think about those relational dialectics that we've talked about before. And one of those relational dialectics is novelty versus predictability. So novelty, of course, is doing something new versus predictability, doing the same old thing. So I've shared on this podcast my predictable thing. Anybody who follows me on social media probably knows by now. Pizza Friday is an institution in my household. And when I grew up, we would have pizza usually on Fridays. Now that I have my own house, I have pizza every Friday, whether I make it, whether I order it, whether I pull it from the freezer. It's Pizza Friday, where novelty is trying new things. So for instance, on my birthday that recently passed, I went to Time Mission here in Philadelphia, which is an interactive game space with 24 rooms where you play different things. That was new. That was different. And so clearly with the self-expansion, you're engaging in novelty acts. You might go to Time Mission, something you wouldn't normally do, or you might go to a play that you maybe wouldn't go to, or a sporting event, or try a new restaurant, or go to a street fair, or travel somewhere. Do new things and experience each other in these new activities. The reason why novelty activities are oftentimes really important for building and maintaining relationships is because you get to see a new side of somebody. They're out of their comfort zone. So how do they act? Do they like this thing? Is it now something that will become a more predictable thing that you do? And also doing predictable things is also a great way to maintain intimacy. So a good relationships needs a balance between the two of them, the novel and predictable. And so through this self-expansion, right, as people form and maintain close romantic bonds, they'll experience a kind of cognitive reorganization where their self-conception expands to include their partner into their identity and discover new strengths and perspectives through the relationship. So this is where you really think of you as a we, right? Not a me or an I or a you, but as a we, and figure out how your relationship culture is going to build and become stronger. Now, I've always maintained on this podcast, in my classroom, and even in my teachings and writings on committed romantic relationships, that it's always still important to have your individuality, but it also is going to be important to invest, build, and maintain your relationship culture. So, of course, individuals with strong growth beliefs are more likely to believe that their partner can change and allow for time in that relationship for them to change and therefore flourish if I have that growth belief. Meanwhile, if I have the destiny belief, where they're meant to be or not, I'm not necessarily going to believe that my partner can change. And or if I maybe believe it, I might not allow for that time and space for it to actually happen. As I've always talked about, especially to my students, change takes time. Rarely do you change overnight. If it's something that's been ingrained, that you've been indoctrinated into, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be trial and error. You might make a great change. You might say you want to make a great change. You might be actively doing it, but you'll have setbacks. Any improvement is not linear. There's always regression or a plateau. Think about maybe if you're active, you're trying to lose weight, right? When you first start, maybe if you go to the gym or get more active, you start eating healthier. Oftentimes, the weight will fall off at the beginning, but then you'll hit a plateau, even though you're doing the same exact things. And if you just continue at it, the plateau will eventually end and you'll start losing that weight again, potentially, if that's what you're looking to do. So we know that clearly this growth belief mindset is way healthier for a relationship because we're always changing, growing, and evolving. Who I was 5 years ago is not who I am today, and who I am today, I know will not be who I am 5 years from now. So if the person I decide to partner with has a destiny belief that we're meant to be or not, but I'm changing, well then aren't we going to eventually hit a space or a place where I'm no longer that person that they fell for? How does that work? And we oftentimes will see long-term committed relationships grow apart because they maybe didn't have that growth belief. They felt they were meant to be or not, and they were, and then they both evolved, and because they didn't have that growth belief that had self-expansion, where you're including this person in these activities where you're growing together, you are stuck with a stranger in your house. Shout out to Tamia. So we know that individuals clearly with a strong growth belief are having more beneficial relationships, right? Contemporary research consistently has shown that self-expansion predicts higher satisfaction, stronger commitment, and even more consistent daily maintenance behaviors for your relationship. So most relationships, committed romantic relationships, eventually fall into a pattern. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but essentially what we see sometimes with our committed romantic relationships is sometimes these patterns start to unwind. And this is where you enter into potentially tensions building and your relationship potentially entering into the deterioration phase. So we know a didactic breakdown, for instance, occurs when romantic partners gradually stop engaging in established patterns, understandings, and routines that make up their relationship culture. And so if partners don't talk about or choose to deny their problems, they're clearly experiencing the didactic breakdown, and this eventually leads to the deterioration of the social phase where you start telling your friends, maybe families, maybe even coworkers about your relationship drama and issues. And then people are going to start giving their opinions, saying break up with them, stay with them, whatever side, or open up your relationship, who knows, in 2026. And this becomes very contentious. So we clearly want to hopefully have this growth belief, which also leads to self-expansion. And it also helps partners clearly maintain closeness over time because individuals with strong growth beliefs are more likely to engage in self-expanding behavior, which reinforces relationship quality by fostering mutual development and deeper connection. To further underscore this, there was a longitudinal survey that followed 904 couples. It was a 2-year study published in 2024 entitled The Role of Relationship Beliefs in Predicting Levels and Changes of Relationship Satisfaction. And this article found that although destiny beliefs predict higher initial satisfaction, right? It's the Disney romance. You met your one, the match. Growth beliefs actually predict slower declines in satisfaction over time. They offer greater long-term protection for relational stability. And therefore, you're not necessarily going through the yo-yos up and downs that come with destiny belief. We're a match or we're not a match. You might not have as high of initial satisfaction, but there's a lower decline in satisfaction, and there is clearly a greater long-term protection for the stability of your relationship. So this research shows that partners who adopt a growth-oriented belief and are actively participating in self-expanding experiences are going to be better equipped to navigate the challenges that come with relationships. They're going to be able to sustain closeness, to build fulfilling, lasting, long-term, committed romantic relationships. And this is going to be especially important when we bring in the digital illusions that exist. So clearly we talked about the illusion of perspective, where this illusion that exists when you believe you have an infinite amount of potential romantic partners out there, just due to these dating apps, due to your social media connections, who you can follow. But if we're honest and we're real with ourselves, the majority of people you follow are probably not interested in dating you. The majority of people you're swiping on these apps oftentimes aren't swiping back, or if they swipe back, sometimes they're not really engaging. So even though you have an abundance of quote unquote options, are they real options? But also, when it comes to the digital space, and something we've talked about from time to time on this podcast, clearly AI is becoming a bigger issue here. So digital technologies are clearly shaping how people are experiencing, how they are pursuing, how they are judging, how they are amplifying unrealistic expectations, right? And undermining, of course, potential genuine connections, because we're seeing these ideal relationships online. Also, these artificial intelligent companions are mirroring ideal traits that we want in a partner, and this can be tempting for people to step into if they're looking for a soulmate. In 2024, so 2 years ago, right? The Institute of Family Study and YouGov surveyed large amount of young adults in America and found that 1 in 4 young adults believed AI partners could replace real romance. That's alarming. That's shocking to me. I'm not one who uses AI. I'm very anti-AI, as I've shared on this podcast before and will continue to share, due to the environmental impacts that it has, the issues with air quality, the usages of water, the increased electrical bills. I just saw here in Pennsylvania that PECO, our energy company, is projecting a 12.5 increase on electric bills per month, about $20 a month for everybody, in part because they're investing in these data centers for AI, right? This is a problem for our environment, for our pockets. it's not something we should want. So 1 in 4 young adults believing that AI partners could replace real romance is troubling. And troubling, of course, on the environmental aspects, as I said, but also on the emotional aspects. Because as we've talked about before, AI is designed to keep you using it, to keep you engaging with it. It's rarely going to spark a conflict with you. It's rarely going to be antagonistic towards you. So while these interactions might feel safe and gratifying, an over reliance on AI can really blur what a real human connection is, because real human connections, you have to navigate conflict. You have to figure out how to repair relationships. You have to figure out how to compromise with people. AI is not going to give you a scenario unless you maybe ask them to create a conflict for us to figure out. Well, that's not realistic in the real world. But having human connections, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be need for repair. There's going to be need for compromise with anybody, with family members, with friends, with clearly committed romantic relationships. So we need to, if you are someone that over relies on AI or who enjoys using it, hopefully you can take a step back and, of course, prioritize real life relationships over those screens. You also hopefully will manage your comparisons. So use them maybe constructively rather than negatively, but also be very mindful and aware that clearly this is usually a highlight reel of individuals, or even individuals who share the woes, quote unquote, of their dating life or their committed romantic relationship or their marriage, oftentimes still aren't giving you the full 100% picture either. And if they are sharing a lot, well, why are they? And oftentimes it's to monetize. We know that conflict and drama and messiness gets likes, gets retweets, gets shares, and that increases their coin. So we want to make sure that we are aware of that, okay, use it constructively if you choose to use it, but that what you're comparing yourself to still isn't realistic. You don't have the full picture. We also clearly want to invest in connection. So couples should invest in time together, be kind, forgiving, work on problem solving. And of course, conflict, as I've always said, is a place where you can love someone from. So I know when I have conflict with my closest friends, we always resolve it. All of my closest friends are very much not conflict avoidant, right? I wouldn't say we're forefront. All right, you said this yesterday and we're beefing. No, not that at all. But if there is a conflict, there is an issue, we don't run away from it because we know that conflict is a position where we can love each other from. I care about you. So if I've done something to hurt your feelings, I'm going to hopefully fix that, or we're going to compromise and figure out how we can move past that. We're going to work on repair. We're going to brainstorm, and we're not going to see conflict as a lose-lose or a win-lose. We're going to see it as a win-win because ultimately it will strengthen our relationship. So I think those are important things to think about to hopefully escape that soulmate trap. Of course, you want to prioritize having self-expansion, which also comes from adopting a growth belief mindset that supports constructive coping, self-expansion, and slower declines in satisfaction, and ideally move away from that destiny belief, which suggests that relationships are either meant to be or not. Listen, I am a huge fan of rom-coms. Anybody that knows me, right? I think J-Lo is the rom-com queen, of course. She is still doing rom-coms in her 50s, where these other ladies are not. Rom-coms, of course, put out kind of that destiny belief in a sense, right? That people are kind of meant to be or not. Some of them have that growth belief where maybe opposites attract and they work with each other and figure it out. But most of it is designed or wrapped up in that destiny belief, that soulmate viewing, where I think about why am I blanking on the J-Lo? I'm blanking on the wedding planner, right? That's the one I was thinking about, right? It's clearly destiny belief one. So ultimately, we want to hopefully let go of that belief of the soulmate or the one, because research has really shown us that actually lasting love is not the result of destiny, but it is the result of effort, growth, commitment, investment, and really building with each other. The evidence from studies, right, as recent as the 2024 study that I talked about, but even from decades long, other studies show that really investing in meaningful and enduring connections is the requirement for building a long-term committed romantic relationships. So you need to nurture your relationship. You need to embrace the imperfections. Be willing to grow together. Be willing to compromise, to repair, and to not run away or be conflict avoidant. So that is kind of the article in a nutshell. With that said, we will move into our Ask Dr. Shepard for the week. As I have said, if you would like to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So this week's Ask Dr. Shepard was from a social media follower who asked me about how I maintain my friendships. So, hi, Dr. Shepard. I've been following you on Twitter and Instagram for a few years now, and you oftentimes share about your close ties with your best friends. I'm wondering, though, how do you go about maintaining these relationships? You oftentimes have shared that you talk for hours or FaceTime for hours on the phone with them, and I have really been struggling to build and maintain close ties with friends since fully entering adulthood and graduating from college. Any suggestions would be helpful. Thank you so much. And then, of course, they sign their name. So, hello, Twitter, Instagram follower. When it comes to friendships, as I've always maintained, right, any type of communication is always context, content, and communicator specific. So for me, it's easier to maintain friendships because I just have more time than probably the average adult. My job, I work in person 2 days a week, and in theory and in practice, I work 3 days a week, right? I have office hours on 3 days. I teach 2 days, and the rest of my days are grading, research, reading, email. But in the midst of all of that, if I'm not physically teaching, I can be free to get on the phone or talk to people or text. And so it allows me this freedom and flexibility to invest in these friendships. Several of my close friends or best friends are also in academic aligned positions. So their schedules are also a little more non-traditional, which allows us to talk in the middle of the day, or we could stay up late sometimes and talk on the phone if need be. But my friends who have more traditional roles where they have a more 9 to 5 where they can't speak, we set check-ins usually. So for one of them, it's usually every other month because he doesn't like being on the phone. And for my other friend who has a more traditional job, and we also kind of struggle and battle with the time zone change, we talk probably in a significant portion about once every 3 to 5 months. But in between then, we will share things on social media. We will text one another, send voice notes. And that is, of course, more asynchronous, but we definitely plan synchronous. And then because I'm a planner, anybody who knows me, with certain friends, right, especially my closest friends, I kind of do long-term planning. So maybe there's an artist we both like, and if they're coming and I see the concert, right, we'll get the tickets and then we'll plan around that to either I fly to them or they fly to me or drive up or do whatever. So constantly in each other's orbit and making that investment. So for you, as you've shared that you're struggling to build and maintain close ties, it's hard. It's very difficult as an adult. When I first moved to Philadelphia almost 10 years ago, I didn't know anybody here. And so it took me a while to really build and maintain friends that are here. Now, unfortunately, all of my best friends do not live in the Philadelphia area. The closest one probably lives in DC, but we still find the time. Literally yesterday, I talked to 3 of my 5 best friends, kind of back to back. And I talked to them all for several hours because I had the freedom and flexibility where I was done teaching at 1 o'clock. I had office hours, but nobody ever comes to office hours. So I was able to talk to one of them while I was in office hours. And I went to the gym, and once I was done doing something that, was requiring a lot of breathing and I was not doing heavy weights, I called another one. And then when that was done, another one called me. And then I wrapped up my evening and went to sleep. So it's about finding that time. And sometimes it can be as basic at the beginning as just scheduling check-ins, literally Google Calendar or iCal, and putting in each other's phones, hey, we're going to talk every other Wednesday for an hour, and building those things in. Or if you have shows you can watch together, or movies you maybe watch apart but then talk about it afterwards. So I know for some of my friends earlier on, right, with the scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, we would be kind of live tweeting it with one another. And then when both of them are over, we might get on a group call and talk, bringing some of that back if you can. Now, of course, a lot of TV watching is not as linear as it was, where a lot of people have kind of cut the cord so they don't watch things live, but you can still make plans to maybe watch things a day later and then talk about them. So I think it's really about getting creative with how you can really build and maintain those friendships. As we talked about, even with committed romantic relationships, that novelty versus predictability. Build some predictability into your friendship, whether it is every other week we're going to talk, and then it just grows from there. Literally, one of my closest, 2 of my closest friends I talk to almost every day, and it's just kind of ratcheted up. It built from there, that we just naturally would call each other. And sometimes, I'm busy and I don't pick up, or sometimes they're busy and they don't pick up. But more times than not, we find time to talk. Literally, one of my best friends, Kira, we were playing phone tag for about 2 days, and then we got on the phone and we talked for several hours. And then literally the next day we talked again for several hours. And now today we've texted just a bit. So it's just about figuring out how to build and maintain those aspects into your friendship. Of course, it's always context, content, and communicator specific. So figure out what works between you and that friend, and then build from there. That would be my advice. So thank you all for listening. Of course, if you ever want to submit and ask Dr. Shepard, feel free once again to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. And other than that, I will see you all on the next one. Goodbye.